December 24th, 1944. The Belgian Ardennes lay frozen beneath a pewter sky, where morning mist clung to pine forests like the breath of sleeping giants. At 25,000 feet above this winter battlefield, the air carried a metallic bite that penetrated even the heated cockpits of American fighters. The sound of radial engines echoed across snow-covered ridgeline like distant thunder, announcing the return of Allied air power after 7 days of weather-imposed silence. Major Francis Gabreski adjusted his oxygen mask inside the cramped cockpit of his Republic P-47D Thunderbolt, call sign Gabby's Angels. The instrument panel cast a pale blue glow across his weathered face as he scanned the horizon through frost-etched plexiglass. Below, the white expanse of the Ardennes concealed one of the most desperate battles of the European war. Radio static crackled through his headset, carrying fragments of urgent communications from ground forces trapped in the town of Bastogne. The morning air smelled of high-octane aviation fuel and the ozone scent that preceded winter storms. Ice crystals formed delicate patterns on the canopy edges, reminding every pilot that December in Belgium was nature's attempt to ground the mightiest air force ever assembled. For 7 consecutive days, thick cloud cover and freezing fog had rendered Allied air superiority meaningless. German forces had exploited this meteorological advantage with devastating effectiveness, launching what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. In Wehrmacht command bunkers scattered throughout the Eifel region, German officers had spent those foggy days in unprecedented optimism. Oberst Adolf Galland, the legendary Luftwaffe ace, had reportedly observed to his staff that American pilots were nothing without their overwhelming numbers and clear skies. The assessment was shared by ground commanders who watched Allied air bases remain eerily silent while German panzer divisions carved deep penetrations into American lines. They called the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the flying milk bottle. During those first encounters in 1940, German pilots, accustomed to the sleek, nimble Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, regarded the massive American fighter with mixture of contempt and bewilderment. At 7 tons fully loaded, the Thunderbolt was nearly twice the weight of most European fighters. Its enormous fuselage housed a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine that displaced 2,800 cubic inches and generated over 2,000 horsepower in war emergency power settings. Luftwaffe veterans dismissed it as a bomber pretending to be a fighter. They mocked its supposed sluggishness in aerial combat, failing to comprehend that American engineers had designed something entirely different from the nimble interceptors of European doctrine. The P-47 represented industrial thinking applied to aerial warfare, overwhelming firepower, exceptional durability, and the ability to carry external fuel tanks that extended its operational range far beyond anything the Axis powers could field. Major Gabreski belonged to the 56th Fighter Group, the first unit to receive Thunderbolts in the European Theatre of Operations. Based at RAF Boxted in England, the 56th had initially struggled to adapt their tactics to the massive aircraft. Early combat reports from 1943 missions described frustrating encounters where German fighters could outturn and outclimb the heavily loaded Thunderbolts, leading to embarrassing losses and damaged morale among American pilots still learning to fight a different kind of air war. The technical specifications told only part of the story. Each P-47D carried 8 Browning M2, 50 caliber machine guns, 4 mounted in each wing, with a combined rate of fire exceeding 6,000 rounds per minute. The ammunition load of 425 rounds per gun meant that a 3-second burst could deliver nearly 300 projectiles toward a target. Unlike the mixed armament of German fighters, which combined machine guns with slower-firing cannons, the Thunderbolt's homogeneous battery could saturate target areas with sustained fire that could shred aircraft structures or devastate ground installations. But on that Christmas Eve morning in 1944, the P-47s carried more than just ammunition. External hardpoints beneath each aircraft supported additional fuel tanks, bombs, or rocket pods that transformed the fighters into multi-role platforms capable of ground attack missions far from their home bases. The 75-gallon external fuel tanks extended the Thunderbolt's combat range to over 800 miles, allowing missions deep into German territory that would have been impossible for shorter range. The Battle of the Bulge had begun 8 days earlier when German forces launched Operation Watch on the Rhine, a massive counter-offensive designed to split Allied armies and recapture the port of Antwerp. 3 German armies, totaling over 400,000 men and 400 tanks and assault guns, had achieved complete tactical surprise against thinly defended American positions in the supposedly quiet Ardennes sector. Within 48 hours, German spearheads had penetrated up to 20 miles into American territory, creating a dangerous bulge in Allied lines that threatened to reach the Meuse River. Weather had become Germany's most effective ally. Thick, overcast skies and freezing fog had grounded Allied tactical air support precisely when American ground fit most. The 101st Airborne Division, hastily deployed to hold the critical road junction at Bastogne, found themselves surrounded by German forces and cut off from resupply. Without air support, American artillery units struggled to coordinate defensive fires against German attacks that seemed to emerge from the mist without warning. General George S. Patton's Third Army had begun a dramatic shift northward to relieve Bastogne, but progress remained slow against German resistance and difficult winter conditions. The weather forecast for December 24th promised clearing skies for the first time in over a week, potentially allowing massive Allied air intervention that could tip the balance of the entire battle. Every available fighter and bomber group across England and liberated Europe prepared for what military planners recognized might be the decisive air operation of the winter campaign. Major Gabreski's formation represented just one small element of this massive aerial response. His squadron of 16 P-47 Thunderbolts had launched from RAF Boxted at 0630 hours, joining dozens of other fighter groups converging on the Ardennes battle from bases scattered across England, France, and Belgium. The mission briefing had emphasized the critical nature of their ground attack: locate and destroy German armored columns advancing toward Bastogne while providing close air support for surrounded American paratroops. The flight across the English Channel proceeded without incident, but radio communications revealed the scope of Allied air operations that Christmas Eve morning. Fighter control reported over 2,000 Allied aircraft airborne simultaneously, including heavy bombers targeting German airfields and supply depots, medium bombers attacking transportation choke points, and fighter bombers, like Gabreski's formation, assigned to direct battlefield intervention. It represented the largest single-day air operation mounted by Allied forces since D-Day. As the formation crossed into Belgian airspace, the weather began clearing dramatically. Broken clouds at 8,000 feet gave way to unlimited visibility that revealed the snow-covered Ardennes landscape in sharp detail. Smoke columns marked burning villages and equipment, while the geometric patterns of military vehicles became visible along roads and in forest clearings. Radio chatter increased as pilots began identifying targets and coordinating attack runs with ground controllers. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group from his own P-47, established contact with ground-based radio operators near Bastogne. The communications revealed desperate conditions within the surrounded pocket: ammunition running low, medical supplies exhausted, and German attacks intensifying against the perimeter. Weather had prevented supply drops for 3 consecutive days, and morale among the defenders was reaching critical levels despite their determined resistance. The first German positions came into sight at 0847 hours as Gabreski's formation approached the town of Houffalize, approximately 15 miles northeast of Bastogne. Through binoculars, pilots could observe German armored vehicles positioned along tree lines and camouflaged beneath winter netting. The methodical deployment suggested experienced units rather than hastily assembled reserves, confirming intelligence reports that Germany had committed some of its finest remaining divisions to the Ardennes offensive. German anti-aircraft defenses opened fire as the American formation descended toward attack altitude. Black bursts of 88mm flak appeared around the P-47s, followed by streams of lighter automatic weapons fire that created deadly crosshatch patterns across the sky. The Thunderbolt's reputation for absorbing battle damage would face its most severe test, as pilots prepared to dive through this defensive gauntlet to reach targets below. Major Gabreski selected his target, a column of German tanks and half-tracks moving south along a secondary road toward Bastogne. Intelligence estimates suggested this could be elements of the 2nd Panzer Division, one of Germany's elite armoured formations that had spearheaded the breakthrough in the northern sector of the offensive. Destroying or disrupting this column could significantly delay German attempts to tighten the ring around the surrounded American garrison. The attack run began with a steep diving approach from 12,000 feet, allowing the heavy P-47s to build tremendous speed while presenting difficult targets for German gunners. Engine noise shifted from the steady drone of cruise power to the rising shriek of war emergency settings as pilots advanced throttles and propeller controls to maximum performance. Airspeed indicators climbed past 400 miles per hour as the fighters plummeted toward their targets through increasingly intense ground fire. At 2,000 feet altitude, Gabreski opened fire with all 8 machine guns, sending streams of 50 caliber bullets into the German column. Tracer rounds created brilliant streaks against the white snow as armor-piercing and incendiary ammunition found targets among the vehicles below. A half-track exploded in orange flame as its fuel tank ignited, while tank crews scrambled from their vehicles seeking cover in nearby woods. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds before Gabreski pulled up sharply to avoid collision with the ground, his aircraft straining under nearly 6 times the force of gravity as he recovered from the dive. Behind him, other P-47s continued their attacks in sequence, methodically working over the German column with machine gun fire and small bombs carried on external racks. Radio calls confirmed multiple vehicle kills and secondary explosions that suggested ammunition trucks had been hit during the assault. But German defensive fire had found its mark as well. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, flying wing position on Gabreski's right, reported damage to his engine cooling system after taking multiple hits during his attack run. Oil temperature gauges showed dangerous reading, and rough engine operation suggested internal damage that could lead to complete power failure. The formation faced an immediate decision: abort the mission to escort the damaged aircraft home, or continue the attack while one pilot attempted a solo return to base. Johnson solved the dilemma by announcing his intention to continue fighting, despite the mechanical problem. His P-47 could still maintain formation, and external damage appeared manageable if the engine continued running. The decision reflected both Johnson's personal courage and the broader American philosophy of accepting calculated risks to maximize mission effectiveness. Unlike European air forces that emphasized aircraft preservation, American doctrine prioritized mission accomplishment even at the cost of higher equipment. The formation reformed at 8,000 feet and proceeded south toward Bastogne, where smoke columns indicated ongoing ground combat. Radio communications with forward air controllers provided target updates and friendly force positions that would guide the next phase of their attack mission. Intelligence reports suggested German forces were preparing a major assault against the Bastogne perimeter, potentially timed to begin on Christmas Day, as a psychological blow against American defenders. As they approached the beleaguered town, pilots could observe the tactical situation with unprecedented clarity. German positions formed a rough circle around Bastogne, with artillery pieces and mortar positions clearly visible in forest clearings and behind ridgelines. American defensive positions appeared as geometric patterns of foxholes and weapon emplacements, concentrated most heavily along roads leading into the town from the north and where German attacks had been most persistent. The sight that greeted American pilots was both inspiring and sobering. Despite overwhelming odds and complete encirclement, the 101st Airborne Division had created a cohesive defensive perimeter that showed no signs of imminent collapse. Smoke from cooking fires suggested adequate food supply, while the methodical placement of defensive positions indicated professional military leadership rather than desperate improvisation. The paratroopers were holding their ground with characteristic tenacity. Gabreski received radio contact from Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, commanding the 101st Airborne Division within Bastogne. The general's voice carried calm determination, despite his desperate tactical situation, requesting airstrikes against German artillery positions that had been shelling the town continuously for 3 days. Specific coordinates followed, along with updates on friendly positions to prevent fratricide attacks against American forces operating outside the main perimeter. The target was a battery of German 105mm howitzers, positioned approximately 2 miles northeast of Bastogne, camouflaged among pine trees but betrayed by muzzle flashes visible from the air. These guns had been systematically shelling American positions, medical facilities, and supply areas within the town, causing severe casualties among both military personnel and Belgian civilians who had taken refuge with the American garrison. Approaching from the west to avoid overflying friendly positions, the P-47 formation began its attack at 10:15 hours. The dive angle was steeper than normal to ensure accuracy against the pinpoint targets, while airspeed remained high enough to complicate German tracking by anti-aircraft gunners. Machine gun fire commenced at 1,500 feet altitude, with concentrated bursts aimed at individual gun positions and their supporting personnel. The first howitzer exploded in dramatic fashion as 50 caliber incendiary rounds ignited stored propellant charges. The blast was visible from miles away and immediately drew attention from other German positions in the area. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition stockpiles cooked off, creating a chain reaction that eliminated the entire artillery battery within minutes of the initial attack. German response was swift and violent. Anti-aircraft guns throughout the area concentrated fire on the attacking P-47s, creating a deadly crossfire pattern that forced pilots to take evasive action while maintaining their attack run. Lieutenant Johnson's damaged aircraft began trailing smoke as additional hits compromised his already weakened engine, but he continued his attack run despite obvious mechanical distress. The psychological impact on German forces was immediately apparent. Radio intercepts revealed confused communications as ground commanders reported massive air attacks and requested additional anti-aircraft support. After 7 days of operating without significant air interference, German units were unprepared for the intensity and coordination of Allied airstrikes that began that Christmas Eve morning. At 10:47 hours, Johnson's engine finally succumbed to battle damage and oil starvation. The big radial seized with dramatic finality, leaving his P-47 as a 14,000-pound glider over enemy territory. Johnson immediately began searching for suitable crash landing sites, while his squadron mates provided escort and prepared to call for rescue operation if he survived the forced landing. A snow-covered field approximately 3 miles south of Bastogne offered Johnson's best option for survival. The approach required gliding over German positions that opened fire as the crippled P-47 descended, but Johnson managed to reach the field and execute a wheels-up landing that left him alive, though shaken. Within minutes, American ground forces reached the crash site and evacuated Johnson to safety, demonstrating the improved tactical coordination between air and ground units that characterized later war operations. The loss of Johnson's aircraft represented more than just a single P-47 shot down over Belgium. It symbolized the calculated risks American forces accepted to maintain offensive pressure against German positions. Unlike the conservation-minded tactics employed by Axis forces operating with limited resources, American doctrine emphasized aggressive action supported by industrial capacity that could replace losses through increased production rather than operational restraint. Major Gabreski reformed his remaining aircraft and continued the mission towards secondary targets identified during the intelligence briefing. German truck convoys moving supplies toward the front lines offered lucrative targets that could disrupt enemy logistics, while the weather remained clear for air operations. Each destroyed vehicle represented ammunition, fuel, or medical supplies that would not reach German combat units facing American defenders. The next target appeared at 11:34 hours. A convoy of approximately 20 German vehicles moving south along a forest road toward Bastogne. The column included both military trucks and requisitioned civilian vehicles, suggesting German logistics units were experiencing equipment shortages that forced them to improvise transportation solutions. Several vehicles towed anti-aircraft guns, indicating German recognition that air attacks had become their primary threat. This time, the attack developed differently. German convoy commanders had learned from previous encounters and implemented dispersion tactics that complicated targeting for attacking aircraft. Vehicles maintained greater intervals and sought cover beneath overhanging trees whenever possible, while anti-aircraft guns deployed in positions that provided mutual support against diving fire. The P-47s adapted their tactics accordingly. Rather than sequential diving attack, Gabreski ordered simultaneous approaches from multiple directions that would overwhelm German defensive fire and prevent coordinated responses. The formation split into two elements that attacked from perpendicular angles, creating crossfire patterns that eliminated the convoy's ability to concentrate anti-aircraft fire effectively. Results were devastating for the German convoy. Within 3 minutes, 15 vehicles burned alongside the forest road, while their surviving crews fled into the surrounding woods. Ammunition trucks created spectacular explosions that could be heard for miles, while fuel tankers sent black smoke columns high into the clear December sky. The convoy's anti-aircraft guns fell silent as their crews abandoned positions under overwhelming machine gun. Radio communications revealed similar successful attacks occurring throughout the Ardennes region, as hundreds of Allied fighters struck German positions with unprecedented coordination. Weather conditions remained perfect for air operations, allowing continuous missions that maintained pressure on German forces throughout the daylight. Fighter control reported target-rich environments wherever aircraft appeared, suggesting German logistics networks were struggling to adapt to renewed Allied air superiority. By noon on Christmas Eve, the tactical situation around Bastogne had begun shifting in America's favor. Continuous air attacks had disrupted German artillery positions, supply convoys, and troop movement, reducing pressure on the surrounded 101st Airborne Division, while complicating German offensive preparation. More importantly, the psychological impact of massive Allied air presence was becoming apparent through intercepted radio communications that revealed growing German concerns about their ability to complete the offensive successfully. Major Gabreski's formation landed at their Belgian airfield at 13:47 hours after nearly 7 hours of continuous operation. Aircraft showed extensive battle damage from German anti-aircraft fire, with several P-47s requiring major repairs before returning to combat status. Ground crews immediately began refueling and rearming procedures while pilots attended debriefing sessions that provided intelligence updates and target assignments for afternoon missions. The human cost had been relatively light, considering the intensity of combat operations. Lieutenant Johnson's forced landing represented the formation's only total aircraft loss, while several other pilots had sustained minor injuries from shell fragments that penetrated cockpit armor. Medical personnel treated these casualties quickly, allowing most pilots to return to flight status after brief recovery periods. But the strategic implications extended far beyond a single squadron's combat operation. Christmas Eve 1944 marked the beginning of sustained Allied air operations that would continue throughout the remaining weeks of the Battle of the Bulge, ultimately contributing to German defeat through relentless pressure on logistics network, communication systems, and frontline combat units. Weather remained clear through the afternoon, allowing multiple additional missions against German targets throughout the Ardennes region. P-47 Thunderbolts from bases across liberated Europe continued attacking German positions with methodical persistence, demonstrating the industrial capacity that allowed American forces to sustain high-intensity operations indefinitely. Each successful mission degraded German combat effectiveness while building momentum for eventual Allied counteroffensives. As darkness approached on December 24th, Major Gabreski prepared for his third mission of the day. Aircraft maintenance crews had repaired battle damage and installed fresh ammunition loads, while intelligence officers provided updated target folders containing the latest information on German positions and movement. The dedication of support personnel matched that of combat pilots in ensuring maximum operational effectiveness, despite difficult conditions and long working. The evening mission targeted German reinforcements moving toward Bastogne under cover of darkness. Night reconnaissance had identified armored units approaching from the east, potentially including elements of elite SS divisions that could tip the tactical balance if they reached the battlefield intact. Destroying or delaying these reinforcements could provide crucial time for American relief forces advancing from the south. Navigation at night required exceptional skill and careful coordination to avoid attacking friendly forces operating in the same general area. Pilots relied on dead reckoning techniques, supplemented by radio beacon signals from Allied positions, while maintaining radio silence to prevent German interception of mission detail. The technical demands placed enormous stress on aircrew members, who had already flown multiple combat missions during the preceding 12 hours. Contact with German forces occurred at 20:15 hours as Gabreski's formation approached the reported position of enemy armored units. Muzzle flashes from tank guns provided targeting references, while vehicles' headlights created distinctive patterns that identified military convoys despite blackout precautions. German forces appeared to be moving with greater caution than during daylight hours, but were still vulnerable to air attack in the open terrain of the Ardennes Plateau. The night attack developed with precision, despite challenging visibility conditions. P-47s approached from multiple directions using coordinated timing that maximized surprise while minimizing exposure to defensive fire. Machine gun bursts created brilliant tracer displays against the winter darkness, providing spectacular visual effects that marked successful hits on German vehicles and equipment. Several German tanks erupted in flames as 50-caliber armor-piercing rounds found vulnerable points in their armor systems. Unlike the heavily protected frontal areas, tank sides and rear sections offered more promising targets for aircraft machine guns, especially when attacks came from optimal angles that maximized penetration potential. Secondary explosions indicated ammunition storage areas had been compromised by the sustained machine gun fire. German anti-aircraft response was less effective during darkness, as gunners struggled to track fast-moving targets against the star-filled sky. Some defensive fire relied on sound tracking rather than visual acquisition, leading to less accurate fire that posed reduced threats to attacking aircraft. However, the psychological pressure on pilots remained intense as they pressed attacks against unseen defenders who could still inflict lethal damage with lucky shots. By 2130 hours, the German armored column had ceased meaningful movement as vehicles burned throughout the area or took defensive positions to await daylight. American air attacks had achieved their primary objective of preventing German reinforcements from reaching Bastogne during the night, providing additional time for General Patton's relief forces to close the remaining distance to the surrounded garrison. Christmas Day brought continued clear weather and intensive Allied air operations throughout the Ardennes region. P-47 Thunderbolts flew multiple missions against German positions, while heavy bombers struck transportation centers and supply depots deeper in German territory. The sustained air campaign represented industrial warfare at its most efficient, overwhelming material superiority, directed by competent leadership, against an enemy lacking adequate resources to respond effectively. Major Gabreski flew his final mission of the Christmas period on December 26th, participating in close air support operations that directly assisted advancing elements of Patton's Third Army as they fought to break through German defensive positions south of Bastogne. Radio coordination between air and ground units demonstrated the tactical integration that characterized American military operations during the final phases of the European War. German resistance began collapsing under combined pressure from air attacks and ground advances that exploited weaknesses created by sustained bombing and strafing operations. Artillery positions fell silent as gun crews abandoned equipment under continuous air attack, while supply convoys ceased moving during daylight to avoid certain destruction by prowling fighter bombers. The relief of Bastogne occurred on December 26th, when lead elements of the 4th Armored Division established contact with paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division. General McAuliffe's legendary response to German surrender demands had become reality. The surrounded American forces had held their positions against overwhelming odds until relief from the south. Air power had provided crucial support during the most dangerous period when German forces possessed their greatest advantage. Statistical analysis revealed the effectiveness of Allied air operations during the Battle of the Bulge. Over 15,000 sorties flown between December 24th and January 15th resulted in destruction of hundreds of German vehicles, dozens of artillery pieces, and significant casualties among combat units attempting to operate in daylight hours. More importantly, air attacks disrupted German logistics systems to the extent that forward units experienced critical shortage of fuel and ammunition. The psychological impact proved equally significant. Intercepted German communications revealed widespread demoralization among units subjected to continuous air attack, particularly those accustomed to operating without significant air interference. During the initial phases of the offensive, Luftwaffe units proved incapable of challenging Allied air superiority, despite desperate attempts to provide defensive coverage for ground force. Major Gabreski's combat tour concluded in January 1945, with 28 confirmed aerial victories and numerous successful ground attack missions. His experiences illustrated the evolution of American fighter tactics, from pure air-to-air combat toward multi-role operations that emphasized ground support capability. The P-47 Thunderbolt had proven itself as much more than the flying milk bottle initially dismissed by German pilots. Technical innovations contributed significantly to Allied success during the Ardennes campaign. Improved radio equipment enabled better coordination between air and ground forces, while enhanced navigation systems reduced fratricide incidents that had plagued earlier operations. External fuel tanks extended fighter aircraft range to establish air superiority over deep German territory, disrupting enemy logistics networks far from the immediate battlefield. Industrial capacity remained the fundamental advantage that allowed American forces to sustain intensive operations indefinitely. Aircraft losses were quickly replaced by new production, while pilot training programs provided steady streams of qualified aircrew members to maintain squadron strength. German forces lacked comparable resources and faced aircraft shortages that limited their ability to respond to Allied air superiority. The Battle of the Bulge marked the final major German offensive operation of the European War. While initial success had been achieved through surprise and favorable weather conditions, sustained Allied air operations demonstrated the futility of conducting large-scale ground offensives without adequate. German forces never again attempted comparable operations, instead adopting defensive tactics that prolonged the war without offering realistic possibilities for victory. War diary entries from participant units provide personal perspectives on the Christmas Eve operations that helped turn the tide of the Ardennes battle. Pilots described both the technical challenges of flying multiple combat missions under difficult conditions and the emotional satisfaction of providing direct support to surrounded American ground forces fighting for survival. Equipment reliability proved crucial during sustained operations that placed exceptional demands on both aircraft and support systems. P-47 Thunderbolts demonstrated remarkable durability under combat conditions, with many aircraft completing multiple missions despite significant battle damage. Engine reliability remained consistently high throughout intensive operations that would have stressed less robust aircraft beyond their operational limits. Maintenance personnel worked around the clock to keep aircraft mission capable, despite limited spare parts availability and challenging winter weather conditions. Their dedication matched that of combat aircrew in ensuring mission success, though their contributions received less public recognition than the dramatic exploits of fighter pilots engaging enemy forces directly. Modern military historians increasingly recognize the crucial role played by technical specialists in determining combat outcomes. Post-war interviews with German participants revealed their perspectives on Allied air operations during the Battle of the Bulge. Veterans consistently emphasized the demoralizing effect of continuous air attacks against which they possessed inadequate defensive resources. Many described the Christmas Eve airstrikes as the turning point when German forces realized their offensive could not succeed against overwhelming Allied material advantages. The strategic lessons learned during the Ardennes campaign influenced post-war military doctrine development in both the United States and other Allied nations. Air-ground coordination techniques pioneered during the battle became standard practice in subsequent conflicts, while industrial mobilization concepts validated the importance of manufacturing capacity in determining war outcomes between major powers. Technical data analyzing P-47 performance during the Battle of the Bulge confirmed design decisions made years earlier by Republic aviation engineers. The heavily built airframe and powerful engine proved well suited to ground attack missions that subjected aircraft to intense anti-aircraft fire, while generous fuel capacity enabled extended operations far from home bases. Combat experience validated theoretical engineering principles under actual battlefield conditions. Allied intelligence services used captured German documents to assess enemy perspectives on American air operations during the Ardennes offensive. Reports consistently emphasized German surprise at the intensity and coordination of air attacks once weather conditions improved, suggesting inadequate understanding of Allied capabilities before the battle. This intelligence gap contributed to German strategic miscalculations that doomed their offensive from its inception. Logistics analysis revealed the enormous scale of support operations required to maintain Allied air superiority throughout the Battle of the Bulge. Thousands of tons of aviation fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and other supplies moved through complex distribution networks to keep hundreds of aircraft operational under combat conditions. The efficiency of these support systems demonstrated American industrial and organizational capabilities that German forces could not match. Medical records documented the physical and emotional toll exacted by intensive combat operations during the winter campaign. Flight surgeons treated numerous cases of combat fatigue among pilots who flew multiple high-stress missions during extended periods, while also addressing injuries resulting from combat damage to aircraft systems. Medical support proved an essential component in maintaining pilot effectiveness throughout sustained operations. Weather data from the campaign period illustrated the crucial role played by meteorological conditions in determining operational possibilities for both sides. The 7 days of poor weather that allowed German initial success were followed by extended periods of clear skies that favored Allied air operations. Weather forecasting capabilities gave American forces significant advantages in planning operations that exploited favorable conditions while minimizing exposure to unfavorable weather. Communication intercepts provided real-time intelligence on German reactions to Allied air attacks throughout the campaign. Radio traffic analysis revealed increasing desperation among German commanders as continuous airstrikes disrupted their operational plans and degraded combat effectiveness of subordinate units. Signal intelligence proved invaluable in assessing battle damage and planning subsequent operations against weakened enemy forces. Training records from American pilot preparation programs demonstrated the thorough preparation provided to aircrew before deployment to combat theaters. Hundreds of flight hours in various aircraft combined with extensive classroom instruction on tactics and procedures, produced airmen capable of adapting quickly to combat conditions and employing their aircraft effectively against diverse target types. The Christmas Eve air operations over Bastogne represented more than tactical success in a single battle. They demonstrated the maturation of American military aviation from the experimental force that entered the war in 1941 to the dominant air power that controlled European skies by late 1944. Technical competence, industrial capacity, and professional leadership combined to create military capabilities that proved decisive in determining the war's outcome. Engineering innovations incorporated into late production P-47 Thunderbolts reflected lessons learned from earlier combat experience. Improved armor protection, enhanced communication equipment, and more reliable mechanical systems increased aircraft survivability and mission effectiveness under combat conditions. Continuous technical refinement maintained American aircraft superiority throughout the war, despite German attempts to develop competing technologies. Statistical analysis comparing German and Allied aircraft losses during the Battle of the Bulge revealed the effectiveness of American tactical adaptations developed through combat experience. Higher German loss rates resulted from inadequate pilot training, limited fuel availability, and mechanical reliability problems that reduced operational effectiveness of Luftwaffe units attempting to challenge Allied air superiority. Post-war economic analysis demonstrated the resource implications of sustained air operations during the Ardennes campaign. Allied forces consumed enormous quantities of fuel, ammunition, and spare parts while maintaining intensive flight operations, but industrial production capacity proved adequate to meet these demands without compromising other military priorities. German forces lacked comparable resource bases to support equivalent operations. The human dimension of Christmas Eve 1944 emerges clearly through personal accounts left by participating aircrew members. Letters home described both professional pride in mission accomplishment and emotional stress resulting from continuous exposure to combat conditions. These documents provide insights into individual experiences within larger historical events that shaped the war's final phases. Technical innovations in aircraft armament proved crucial during ground attack missions against hardened German positions. Armor-piercing ammunition variants increased penetration effectiveness against vehicle armor, while incendiary rounds improved destructive effects against fuel and ammunition storage areas. Continuous technical development maintained Allied tactical advantages throughout evolving combat conditions. Intelligence preparation of the battlefield enabled American forces to identify and prioritize high-value targets that would produce maximum operational impact when destroyed or disabled. Systematic target analysis combined with accurate navigation techniques allowed limited aircraft resources to achieve disproportionate effects against German logistics networks and command systems. The legacy of Christmas Eve 1944 extended far beyond the immediate tactical results achieved during that single day of operations. Allied air power demonstrated capabilities that influenced German strategic decision-making throughout the remaining months of the European war. German forces never again attempted offensive operations of comparable scale, recognizing their inability to operate effectively under conditions of Allied air superiority. Modern military analysis identifies the Battle of the Bulge as a crucial demonstration of integrated air-land operations that became standard practice in subsequent American military doctrine. Coordination techniques developed during the campaign established procedures still employed today in conflicts requiring close cooperation between air and ground forces operating under complex tactical conditions. As we reflect on these events from our current perspective, several questions emerge about the nature of technological warfare and industrial capacity in determining conflict outcomes. How did American industrial mobilization create military advantages that proved decisive against technically competent but resource-limited opponents? What lessons from these operations remain relevant for contemporary military planners facing different but equally challenging operational conditions? The courage demonstrated by Major Gabreski, Lieutenant Johnson, and thousands of other American aircrew members during those crucial December days deserves our continued remembrance and respect. Their willingness to accept calculated risks in support of surrounded ground force exemplified the best traditions of American military service during humanity's greatest. These men flew their missions knowing that each takeoff might be their last, yet they continued operations with dedication that helped preserve freedom for future generations. Their technical competence, professional courage, and commitment to mission accomplishment under the most challenging conditions provide enduring examples of excellence that continue to inspire military aviation today. The P-47 Thunderbolt evolved from a derided flying milk bottle into one of the war's most effective multi-role aircraft through the skill and determination of the men who flew it into combat. Their adaptation of tactics and techniques to maximize aircraft capabilities while minimizing operational risks demonstrated the flexibility and innovation that characterized American military forces throughout the conflict. If you found this detailed examination of Christmas Eve 1944 operations compelling and educational, please consider subscribing to support continued production of historically accurate content that honors the sacrifices made by previous generations in defense of freedom. Share this video with others who appreciate military history and the technical innovations that shaped our modern world. Their stories deserve to be remembered, and your support helps ensure these accounts remain available for future generations who must understand the price of liberty.